The Eye of Elias. True. Nervous, very, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am, but why will you say that I am mad? I loved my grandfather Elias. He had never wronged me. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. One of his eyes resembled that of a vulture, a pale blue eye, with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold, and so by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man, and thus rid myself of the eye forever. You fancy me mad, but you should have seen how wisely I proceeded, with what caution. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night, about midnight, I turned the latch of his door and opened it, oh, so gently, and then I put in a dark lantern, all closed, so that no light shone out. For 7 long nights I performed the same ritual, but I always found the eye closed. It was impossible to do the work, for it was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. Upon the 8th night he sprang up in bed, crying out, "Who's there?" He was still sitting up in the bed listening, just as I have done, night after night, hearkening to the death watches in the wall. I opened the lantern just a crack, and a single dim ray, like the thread of a spider, fell full upon the vulture eye. It was open, wide, wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I heard a low, dull, quick sound. It was the beating of the old man's heart. The beating grew louder. With a yell, I threw open the lantern and leaped into the room. I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. I smiled gaily to find the deed so far done. The heart beat for a few moments more and then ceased. The old man was dead. If still you think me mad, you will think so no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. I cut off the head and the arms and the legs. I then took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber and deposited all between the scantlings. At 4 o'clock, a knocking was heard at the street door. 3 officers of the police had arrived. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor. I smiled, for what had I to fear? I bade the gentlemen welcome and invited them to search the house. I placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse. But soon I fancied a ringing in my ears. It was a low, dull, quick sound, the beating of his hideous heart. It grew louder, louder, louder. "Villains!" I shrieked. "Dissemble no more. I admit the deed. Tear up the planks. Here, here, it is the beating of his hideous heart." The officers, at first, were frozen by my outburst. They exchanged glances, a mixture of disbelief and apprehension on their faces. I stood there, panting, the words hanging in the air like a death sentence. "Here, here," I repeated, my voice a ragged whisper. One of the officers, a stout man with a grim expression, finally knelt down. He produced a crowbar from his kit and wedged it between the planks. The wood groaned in protest as he put his weight into it. The sound was like a final, mournful sigh from the old house itself. With a sharp crack, the board gave way. A foul odor filled the room. The officers recoiled, their faces pale in the lantern light. There, nestled between the beams, lay the ghastly remains of my grandfather. The deed was laid bare for all to see. They bound my hands in cold iron. As they led me from the house, the sun was beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of gray and pink. I glanced back one last time at the window of the old man's room, and for a fleeting moment I saw it, a pale blue orb filmed over, watching me go. My new home was a cell, damp and cold. The walls were stone, and the only light came from a small, barred window high above. For the first time in days, the house was quiet. The beating of the heart had ceased, but the silence that replaced it was a hollow, echoing void that threatened to swallow me whole. But the peace did not last. A few nights later I heard it again, faintly at first, like a distant drum. Thump, 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 thump. I pressed my ear against the cold stone floor, trying to locate the source, but it was everywhere and nowhere at once. It was inside my head. A doctor came to see me. He had kind eyes and a soft voice, but I knew he was one of them. I explained everything with perfect calm, the wisdom of my plan, the precision of my actions. It was the eye, I told him. You must understand. He simply nodded and wrote in his little book. The sound grew louder, louder, louder. It was a constant, maddening rhythm that hammered against my skull. I began to see the eye in the stains on the wall, in the swirl of my watery gruel, even in the polished buttons of the guard's uniform. It was always watching, always judging. They moved me to a room with soft walls. There were no sharp corners, no shadows to hide in. But there was no escape from the eye. It floated in the center of the room, a vast, pale blue sphere. Its filmy gaze piercing my very soul. The beating of the heart was the thunder that accompanied this terrible vision. I am calm now. The noise has faded to a murmur. The visions have ceased. This morning, a guard brought me a small, polished mirror. I do not know why. I held it up, and a stranger stared back at me, a nervous, very, very dreadfully nervous man. And one of his eyes resembled that of a vulture.